around together making beautiful things. We've been creating shelter together in small groups, in large groups for 1 million years. We moved out of the trees a long time ago, way before that, and started living in caves and building our shelters together. So that's in our blood, in our bones, how to create shelter together. And we still do it together as barn raisings and construction projects and things like that. Another important activity, of course, is gathering food, preparing food. A communal activity, something we've done together a lot, going back through time. Where's that ball of yarn gone now? Okay, it's winding over here, there's still a little bit left. So here I am killing time while this ball of yarn goes around, back for 1 million years, just to give you an idea of how long that time is. And of course, raising children together. Everybody does it. It's an important part of being human, the family, an ancient human institution. So these are all things that are in our blood, they're in our bones, they're really, really, really ancient activities for 1 million years. So all the purple on this ball of yarn is that 1 million years, except for the last 10,000 years. This is agriculture here. This is when we started farming. So we often think that farming is what makes us human. I mean, we kind of identify with growing food as being a really important human activity. But we've been doing all those other things as non-farmers for vastly longer than we've been farming. So we have a lot of other things in our blood, in our bones, that go way, way earlier than agriculture. Agriculture is just this little gloss on human history. So it's something that we've added on. So there are lots of different ways to make a living in the world that don't involve agriculture to survive on this planet. And I want to look at that a little bit because I've gotten kind of discouraged with agriculture lately, and I mean, like I say, some of my best friends are farmers, you know, that old cliche, and so I hate to say these sorts of things. But I've had some doubts about agriculture as a way to sustainably make a living on this planet. So I want to look at agriculture a little bit and how it works. So there are lots of ways of having human culture, and they've normally been divided up 5 different ways. The oldest human culture are foragers or hunter-gatherers, kind of like what the animals do. They go out and graze or hunt things. So that's the oldest form of human culture, and most of this yarn has been as foragers, or a lot of it has also been as horticulturalists, which are people who tend plants but don't really domesticate them. They tend animals but they don't really domesticate them. So now that I've unwound that ball of yarn just to show you how long 1 million years is, I suppose we could wind it back up again. But I'm going to hang on to the end of this here. So we're back 1 million years going forward through time now. The third major human culture is agriculture, this last blue part of the ball of yarn here, blue part of the time machine, the last 10,000 years. And then there are 2 other types of human culture that are kind of subcategories of agriculture. You have to have farming first. You have to have domesticated animals. You have to have domesticated plants. There are pastoralists, people who are herders. They run animals around. They're usually nomadic, but the animals are domesticated, so you had to have agriculture first. And then there's industrial society, which is where we are, which you have to have agriculture first to generate the surplus and the food supply that's necessary to provide the energy for an industrial culture. So there really are 5 and kind of 3 major cultures. And I want to stop and look at agriculture a bit, about how it works, why I've become a little discouraged about it. So it really is agriculture civilization. You don't have cities showing up until after agriculture. It's hard to have a lot of the things that we have, we think, without agriculture. So let's look at how agriculture works. Here's the Tigris and Euphrates River, which was once called the Fertile Crescent, and that's now kind of a cruel joke. This is Iraq, where the Tigris and Euphrates are. It had agriculture going on it successfully without irrigation for a couple thousand years. Then they started irrigating, and it didn't last more than a few more centuries. So this is what it looks like now. Here's Greece, which had agriculture going on pretty heavily for about 500 years before it started to look like this. Any of you who've been to Greece know what it looks like now. And the old Greek writers described Greece as verdant hillsides covered with trees and wonderful springs and brooks and waterfalls everywhere and lots of topsoil and beautiful lush land that's very productive. And that's what ancient Greece was like, but it's now eroded bare hillsides with a few scrubby trees on them. It's beautiful, but in a very austere way. And then here is the Dust Bowl in the United States, which was what agriculture was looking like in this country until we started using better technologies and fossil fuels and things like that to help hold the soil in place. So these things, looking at all the places that have had agriculture in them for a long time and finding that pretty uniformly, I mean there are some exceptions, but pretty uniformly they were degrading and degrading and degrading over time. So it started me wondering about, what is it that is happening with agriculture? I started wondering really if there is such a thing as sustainable agriculture. Is it an oxymoron, or can we ever have a sustainable agriculture? So let's look at why I have some doubts about agriculture. The primary thing it does, or one of the many things it does, is that it increases population. The way that happens is that you can grow a lot more food on a small plot of land using agriculture, and so you can feed more people. And then more people need more food, so you clear more land and plant more crops, and it's this positive feedback cycle that keeps inexorably increasing population. The way that some of that works is that once you start growing grains, and that's really the hallmark of agriculture, is domesticating wheat and rye and corn and those sorts of things. They're really high energy sources, a lot more so than protein, a lot more than, say, meat or greens. They're really easily converted into energy. And when an organism gets a lot of energy from its food, it's a signal to it that it's a good time to breed. Things are fat, things are lush, so let's have lots of babies. It's a signal to do that when you have a lot of food. Another thing about growing grains is that you can make porridge out of them, cook them, and make soft foods, and that means that infants can be weaned much earlier than they could before porridges came around. You had to wait until a kid had a good set of teeth before they could be weaned, which meant usually 3 to 4 years or so. And women who are nursing generally don't get pregnant, so it really reduced the birth rate tremendously. Once you started weaning kids early on porridges and soft food, the birth rate just skyrocketed. People could have babies pretty much as frequently as is humanly possible, and they did. So agriculture also is the process of turning ecosystems into things that we can use. Farmland itself is just the kind of the tip of the iceberg in what agriculture needs in the way of land. The crops themselves. You need land for animals and for fodder to feed those animals and for fertilizer or compost crops. You need land for mines and fuels and timber and those sorts of things to build your buildings and make your tools and smelt the metal and all of those sorts of things that you need for agriculture. And you need land to house the farm workers and provide for them and for all the people who work on farms and everywhere else. So it uses, the estimates are that the land footprint of agriculture is 3 to 4 times the size of the actual cropland. So it's really pretty big. So agriculture is really the process of turning ecosystems into people. And that's why it's so effective, because you can take a place that was originally producing for lots of different species and doing all kinds of different things and convert all of those uses into human beings. It's a very, very effective way to turn the sun's energy and the soil and everything else into food for people. It's extremely powerful. And this is a former Brazilian rainforest that's now being converted into sugarcane to grow ethanol. So this is what agriculture does. And I'm always nervous when I say this, because I love gardening, I love farming, I love farmers, I love fresh farm food and all that kind of thing. But I've been had my nose rubbed in this stuff for a little while, and I'm wondering what to do. So farming doesn't allow ecosystems to function. A cornfield does not function the way a forest does. It doesn't provide habitat. We don't normally like a lot of animals, except domesticated ones, on our farms. We don't like weasels and vultures and mice and all sorts of things like that in our farms. We want domesticated animals in our farms. the feedback from an ecosystem that's being turned into a farm is too slow for us to really notice. As a matter of fact, well, say if you're a forager, if you're a hunter-gatherer and you overhunt, you get feedback immediately. That land tells you immediately you've gone too far. You get hungry right away when you've hunted all the animals on it. Whereas with farming, it's that very process of turning the ecosystem into food, of clearing the trees and using up the soil and turning all that energy into food.